We think other people are so gifted, and you
Yes.
are just as gifted. You might have to work harder, but you're just as gifted as the next person.
Welcome to the Business of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Taryn McCarthy, and today is going to be a great day. I'm so excited for you to meet my guest today. Thank you so much for joining me last episode as we talked about the art of listening and how powerful that can be. And on our next episode, this will be a great one as well, is the power of beliefs, and where beliefs can hold us back, can really be limiting for us, but how we can use beliefs and our knowledge of beliefs to really work for us and help us to be even more successful. So today, our guest is a father, an author, and a motivational speaker himself. I'm so excited for you to get to meet this gentleman. I have already learned so much about him and learned so much from him. So I'm excited for you to meet Mr. Jay Reace. Welcome, Jay.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me on the show. And you flattered me, my friend. Wow. I love that introduction. Thank you.
I told you I've been so excited to have this conversation with you for my audience. So I'm really looking forward to today and just to introduce you and your work to the people who listen to my show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, please kick us off here, Jay, and let us know a little bit about you. Tell my audience who you are and why we should know who you are.
So, as you were saying, I'm an author, speaker, and I just believe that everyone has a superhero within. And that has nothing to do with the fact that I'm a huge geek, huge nerd. It's just the fact of the matter. It's true.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, we grow up and somewhere along the road, we think that we have to put these childish things behind when in all essence, we don't. When we're children, it's easier for us to figure out and connect to our inner superpowers, our inner superhero. But again, as we grow up, all these other people project their fears onto us, life experience, a whole gambit of different things causes us to say, you know what, maybe I shouldn't do that. But we should follow what we naturally gravitate towards. I mean, not that we can't do anything outside the norm, but that's what we should do. And I help people try to figure what that is, how to achieve it. And I just am a firm believer that to do as much good as we possibly can with as little harm to others as possible.
Oh, I love that so much, Jay. And the recognizing what's really unique and special about you and that superpower that you have, and really allowing it to be a gift to the world instead of squashing it down.
Absolutely. So when I was a kid, my imagination was enormous. I used to come up with such awesome, great things. And I was that kid that all the other kids would say, what are we doing today? Oh, what game are we playing? What story can you tell us? I was that kid. But the parents, the people, the adults around me didn't know how to harness that or didn't know how to teach me how to harness that. So I was pushed into sports. I was pushed into doing things the way other people did. And there's nothing wrong with sports, and there was nothing wrong with what other people were doing, but it wasn't for me. So along the road, I learned to be quiet and to silence my superpowers. I put my imagination behind me. I stopped writing. I stopped dreaming. I stopped doing all those things that made me feel like me. And I became somebody completely different. And honestly, it was when I was working a 9-to-5 job, saw nowhere out. I was depressed. I felt underappreciated. And I was just honestly was contemplating killing myself.
Wow.
And it got to a point where I was speaking with my supervisor, and she bluntly told me, she was like, hey, you and this other coworker keep having problems. I honestly don't need both of you. You need to work it out, or one of you are going to get fired. So I left there mad and upset. Who does she think she is? How can she fire me? Why is she going for? Does she know she needs me? All those kind of egotistical things. And then as I was getting closer to home, God voice, I don't know what it was. I heard this sound of just like, why are you fighting so hard for something you hate?
Wow.
And I was like, oh, why am I fighting so hard?
Mm.
So I went and I told my wife how I was feeling, that I was having these thoughts of just killing myself because again, this is not the life I wanted to live. I was just completely unhappy. So luckily she was super supportive. We came up with the plan of how we were going to change our lives so I can get out of that situation. I went to work that Monday and I was like, boss, I'm giving you 14 days. I'm out. And it was just as simple as that. I mean, clearly there was more to it. Like there was some self-growth, some process, other stuff I
Yeah.
had to do in the meantime.
Yeah.
But just that relief, I couldn't stop crying. And it was from joy because
Yeah.
I didn't realize how much burden I was carrying on me. And I share that story because we lose touch with our inner child because we're trying to fit into these molds that have been given to us either by society, our loved ones, who knows where it comes from, but for some reason we feel like we can't be ourselves, particularly nowadays when you have social media and everybody presenting the best sides of themselves. There's no authenticity
Mm.
or rarely anymore, you know?
Absolutely. It's so funny because I think as parents, we end up doing this to our children as well. And it's based only out of fear that we want to
Right.
guide them in the right direction. And we think we
Hmm.
know the right direction. But what you're
Hmm.
saying is no one can know the right direction for you.
100%.
Only you can know the right direction for you. And so we take on all these other stories
Hmm.
and guidelines from other people, and we squash that beautiful, unique soul that really was apparent when we were younger.
So one of the pivotal points in my life, and I've had this conversation with my father, so I feel I'm safe enough to share it. So when I was a kid, my father sat me down one day and he was like, you are bigger than life, but not
Mm.
every moment needs you to be bigger than life. I need you to be like water because water can fit into any container. It can be what everyone else needs it to be. I need you to be like water.
Hmm.
So my takeaway from that was I need to fit into everybody else's container and be what everybody else needs me to be. So
Mm.
even to this day, I still have a challenge with being myself. I mean, I'm getting better at it every day, but I still have those issues. And it all stemmed from that one conversation that stayed in my mind.
Mm.
And I've had conversations with my father about it. And clearly, he did not mean anything by it. He
No.
only loved me the best way he knew how to, because as we're already saying, he was projecting this fear of me being ostracized or isolated, all these other things that he thought was going to happen to me, instead of teaching me, you know what? It doesn't matter what everybody else thinks. You be you. So
Mm.
luckily, here's the funny thing. I had that experience, right? That hurt me and pained me. But because of that experience, I'm consistently learning how to be better and be the best version of myself. And because of that, I'm helping my kids be their authentic selves and not be what everybody else needs them and wants them to be.
Mm. That's
Which,
beautiful.
trust me, isn't always easy.
It's not easy. So, how do you do that as a parent, Jay? I mean, I think that's all the dream for all of us, but I'm sure other parents are sitting as I am, just thinking, oh, what have I done? I've limited that beautiful, fiery soul just to
Oh,
appease me and make my day go better. Or, just being scared for him or her, and trying to
right.
guide them. But
Mhm.
how do you do that as a parent? How do you maintain that spark, that uniqueness?
So for me, there's a couple things. The first thing I had to do was learn how to love Jay. I had to
Mm.
learn to love me and like me,
And isn't
like
that
what
the
I see in the
most
mirror.
important thing? Isn't that incredible that
Of
we don't realize
course.
that? Yeah. Sorry to
Hmm.
interrupt.
Right?
Keep telling
No,
me.
no,
Yeah.
but you're right, because like when I wasn't loving myself,
Mm.
I would find that I didn't want to be around my family, my kids, my wife. I wanted to do whatever was going to self gratify me at that moment until I learned how to love me and spend time with me.
Yeah.
So then, after I learned how to love and like myself, I had to set up boundaries to let my kids know, hey, when daddy's working or when daddy's doing this, unless it's an emergency, please don't interrupt me because this is my time. This is what I have to do. So I had to set up those boundaries. Once I had all that in place and I was able to fill my cup, I was able to pour into their cup and see their needs.
Mm-hmm.
And then also we have we have this thing called Judge Daddy, right?
Mm.
So it came up completely by accident. This wasn't something that we intentionally started out to, but I'm so glad that we did it. So I have two children. I have a 15 and an 11-year-old. So this started maybe about 4.5, 5 years ago, where my kids, like most siblings, they argue a lot, right? So we came up with this idea of maybe us doing this show on YouTube that like we would come up with these things based on stuff that we happen and we'll be Judge Daddy where the kids will come into court and they will present the case, all this stuff. But my kids, because again, trying to let them be who they want to be, they were like, we don't want to be on TV. We don't want to YouTube. We don't want none of that. So we're like, okay, fine. I get it. I'm the one who likes attention. You don't. I get it. so the kids, like maybe a month or two later, my daughter runs up to me. I need Judge Daddy. I need Judge Daddy. And I'm like, we're not doing the YouTube thing. No, I need Judge Daddy right now. So that idea became this thing where my kids, they come to me or even my wife, and they're like, hey, we need an impartial judge to hear out the argument and to give a verdict. So my kids, they present only facts. They got to keep emotions out of it, only the facts. And then they're able to let both of their voices be heard. And now they can call court against anybody. They've called court against me, my mother, or not my mother, my wife, and other people in the family. But the purpose of it is to allow them to have a voice.
Yeah.
And there's been interesting situations where we didn't understand how they felt until they gave their opinion or laid out their case. And we're like, oh. So it's actually bringing us all together because, again, we can hear what they're saying and actually listen.
Just having a place to voice your opinion and a space to let everybody just hear you. And
Right.
I think that's so critical for children growing up nowadays because they get lost in so much of the noise around them and then
Right.
not being brave enough, especially if you're not someone who likes to be on stage. If you tend
Right.
to be more introverted, you get lost and not get the opportunity to voice your opinions. That's
Right.
great. I love that. That's awesome. I know I really want to talk about your book because your book fascinates me. Please tell us about legacy because there's so much in there. I know I'd spoken to you about whether your audience was for the book was necessarily for a younger audience or for an adult audience, but the concept and the premise of the book, I think, can reach so many different age groups. So please tell us about legacy.
So legacy is a labor of love. I wrote it for my family, based on my family. And the book is about a family who is in search of peace. They're just tired of the way the world is, and they just want to live harmoniously just by themselves and just in peace. But because of decisions that the parents made, the family now has to figure out how are we going to keep going and find the peace that they search. And it starts a whole chain of events. And I don't want to give too much of the book away, but it's just this wonderful world. And if I had to boil it down and give an example, it's probably a mixture of Avengers meets The Incredibles with diversity.
Awesome. So in there, wrapped up in there, I'm guessing are some recognition of superpowers. And
Absolutely.
okay. Cool. That's so cool. And taking you on an adventure, it sounds like.
Yes. So the world is fantasy adventure. And yes, there are definitely superpowers in the book. So the analogy I use in the book is everybody is born with gifts. Gifts are the world's version of superpowers. So there are some people who can control elements. There are some people who have telekinesis. There are some people who can morph things and shape it to their will, all kind of different powers. But there's one character in particular, Miss Lupita, where she wasn't born with powers per se. So her ability wasn't shown when she was born. And everybody in the world thinks that she doesn't have powers.
Yes.
So later on in the book, she shows everyone that she has powers, and she tells them everyone thinks that you have to, like, you're born with powers or you're not born with powers. No, everybody in this world is born with powers. Some people just are gifted to be able to use them. Other people have to work for them. I had to work for mine, and here they are. So there are a lot of analogies in this book that I like to use to translate what we really are in life, because there's so many times we think other people are so gifted, and you
Yes.
are just as gifted. You might have to work harder, but you're just as gifted as the next person.
This rings true also from many people will say, what is my purpose? And I think
Mhm.
that sometimes it can be wrapped up in this idea of your superpower. And
Yeah.
some people feel like they don't know what their purpose is. There are some people who feel very clearly they know
Mhm.
exactly what that is. This is what I'm meant to do. This is my dream. And it's just a matter of giving yourself permission to follow that purpose or not.
Right.
But there are so many people, especially younger people in their 20s and 30s, who feel like, man, if I just knew what my purpose was, I'd follow it. But,
Uh-huh.
is this what you're alluding to with Miss Lupita? Is that sometimes you don't know what that is, and there might be a time when you have to work towards it?
Absolutely. Because
Yeah.
as you're pointing out, there are people who, yes, from the moment they born, they know they're going to be an athlete. They know
Mhm.
they're going to be an architect. They know they're going to be a doctor, right?
Mhm.
But then there's some of us, me included, I had no clue what my purpose was. I had
Mhm.
no clue what I wanted to do, because for me, there was multiple things that I wanted to do. And
Mhm.
fear was a big part of it too,
Mhm.
but there was a lot of things that I wanted to do. And I feel that the word purpose, or our purpose, gets maybe overused,
Mm.
because I think there are a lot of us who, our purpose, depending on your age or where you are in life, it changes. So like when I was in my 20s, I felt my purpose was to be a resource and a rock for a lot of other people in my life at that time, even
Mm.
if I didn't know that.
Mm.
Now, I feel like my purpose is to help provide a path for my children and create a stable home for my family,
Mm.
or at least that's part of it. See, like, so throughout our lives, there are different purposes, instead of looking just for that one purpose, right? That so many of us try to find. You might have multiple purposes depending on where you are in life.
And that also reminds me of sometimes we get stuck in a purpose, or we feel like
Yeah.
we have to honor that purpose and not allow
Hmm.
ourselves to grow and change from it.
Right.
And just
Hmm.
as you mentioned so eloquently that in your 20s you had a certain vision and a certain direction for your
Yeah.
life and a certain passion,
Hmm.
we should allow ourselves to evolve and change and maybe
Absolutely.
find new superpowers that we didn't have
Yes.
access to when we were younger.
Oh yeah, 100%. There's, as you're saying, there's so many times where we feel that weight of responsibility of like, I got to keep doing this for my family, responsibility, whatever the issue is, but you feel like you have to keep doing it and you don't. So there's several rules that I govern my life by, but one of my main rules is, if I'm not having fun, if I'm not happy doing it, you're probably not going to see me doing it, at least not for long.
Wow.
You know?
That's a tough one, Jay. I don't know. I think many of us struggle with feeling like we deserve to be
Uh-huh.
happy all the time. There's a
Yes.
certain hard work ethic, and
Hmm.
sometimes you have to buckle down. I really
Yeah.
admire that in you, that you
Hmm.
find that you can reach for happiness and know that that's the indicator of
Right.
what you should or shouldn't be doing. How did you come to that realization?
Well, one of my mentors, Mr. Les Brown, he told me one day, you're either fighting for what you want or you're fighting against what you don't want,
Hmm.
right? So in that thought process, I was like, what in my life am I fighting against? What in my life am I fighting to keep away? And I need to start eliminating those. So anytime I feel like I'm doing something that is going against what I want to do, I systematically figure out, how can I alleviate this so I can start doing and fighting for what I want. And
Hmm.
that's essentially my process.
How do you teach that to your kids?
I do my best to live it. to be
Mhm.
honest, because when I was younger and when my kids were little, I would often tell them, don't do this, don't do that. And I would realize they would do it anyway because I was doing it and
Mm.
they were just mimicking me. And
Yeah.
then again, once I learned self-love and to like myself and start doing what I was preaching, they started changing. Now, I mean, every day isn't perfect. I'm not perfect. I don't do everything right. But essentially, a case in point, my daughter would have issues doing her homework when she got home,
Mm.
right? Which, I mean, it's a common thing. Most kids don't want to do homework. Shocking, right? And um, she I was like reprimanding her, like, hey, if you don't do your homework, I'm gonna take your phone and all this other
Mm.
stuff. And she was like, well, you don't do your work. And I was like, first of all, who you talking to? And secondly, I do my work. The lights are on, the house is paid. What are you talking about? You doing my work? I hear you talking to mommy all the time about you putting something off to go watch TV or do something else. You're not doing your work. And
Wow.
I was like, oh, you got a point there. Well, I was thinking that. I didn't say it, but I was thinking that. And I was like, well, first of all, there's things that you don't understand because, we want to grow into that adult ego situation. You're like, well, there's things you don't understand, but you need to do your work. But
Mm.
after that conversation, I started thinking like, wow, she's really watching me. So from now on, I guess I need to do my work.
Wow.
And that's kind of how it started. Again, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes, but that's essentially how that started.
Yeah, it's interesting. We don't realize what a huge role model we are for our kids in many ways, not just in terms of the good and what we hope they aspire to be, but
Mm-hmm.
also they pick up on our negative habits and our negative
Yeah.
mindsets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. My wife shared a story with me. This was like years ago where she would have a habit of saying negative things about her own body,
Yes.
particularly when my daughter or our daughter was around, like when they were like going clothes shopping or stuff like that. And then my wife heard my daughter say the same thing that she had said
Mm.
earlier about her own body. And my wife was like, oh, yeah, I probably shouldn't be doing that in front of her because again, they pick up so many things that we don't even think they're picking up.
Yeah, isn't it incredible what mirrors our children can be for us? It really is a great opportunity to get greater insight of your own behavior and your own
Yeah.
thought process.
Hmm.
That's really incredible. So, you know, one of the things that you had mentioned to me is that you have an alter ego, and your alter ego is this superhero that you named Mr. Positivity. So tell me
Hmm.
about Mr. Positivity. How did he come to life?
So yes, let's give the origin story because every great
Yes,
superhero
please.
has the origin story.
I like it.
So I was speaking with my mentor, Fred Doc Williamson, and he was saying to me that everybody has a superpower, and I gravitated towards that because again, I'm a big geek, and I'm like, well, elaborate. What do you mean? He was like, well, there's things that you love that you might have let go as a child. What is that one thing that you can do better than anybody else? And I looked at him, I was like, well, I don't know if I can do anything better than anybody else. And he was like, well, okay, maybe not better than anybody else, but what is that one thing you always do? What is your default that makes this world a better place?
Yeah.
And I started thinking, I was like, well, I'm happy. And he's like, well, elaborate. What do you mean you're happy? And I'm like, well, anytime there's a bad situation, people just tend to come to me because I often see the brighter side of life. I'm not always in a positive mood, but I'm always able to see something good in almost every situation. He's like, oh, well, is that your superpower? And I started thinking, I was like, I guess that is. I guess that must be my superpower. So he did not tell me to broadcast my alter ego to everybody. That was not his intent. His intent was just to get me to start thinking positively about myself.
Mm.
And then I had a friend who was going through a rough situation, and I knew about her situation, and I didn't want to just call her out because I was already doing things online. And I just made a video and I was like, Mr. Positivity. Yeah. So I was like, hello, everyone. This is Mr. Positivity, your boy, Jay Reace. And I just want to let everyone know today might not be a good day, but you can find good in every day. And it was just something short and simple, just like that. And the response I got from that, I was like, hey, there must be something here. There is
Mm.
a need for people to see positive, meaningful videos, particularly in the world of COVID right now, with
Mm.
everyone being stuck inside. And my friend was appreciative of that video, and she kind of knew it was subconsciously sent to her. And from that moment on, Mr. Positivity was born. Now, with every great superhero, they usually have really great villains. My villain My villain tends to be conformity. I had a really big issue of trying to fit into a box of what everybody else needs or wanted me to be.
Mm.
Seeing other people that I really liked and I wanted to impress them. So I would try to change myself to be what they wanted. So I could be, oh, I'm cool like you. I'm cool.
Mm.
But not realizing that if I was just myself, people would like me anyway. I mean, look at me. What's not to like? I'm an awesome person.
You really are, Jay. It's fascinating because conformity, I agree, can be such a squelcher
Hmm.
of individualism. I mean, that's almost the definition of it, but it's
Right.
also wrapped up in conformity is that self-judgment and
Yes.
judgment of others or
Hmm.
assumptions of the judgments of others.
Hmm.
When
Right.
was a time in your life when you realized that that was negatively impacting your superhero?
Uh, I used to have this friend who worked out all the time. Like he would carry um not a punching bag, but like the boxing punching bag. Like he would carry that around with him all the time. He worked out that much, right? And me and him would go a lot of different places, but everything he put on, he would look good in. Because like one, he was like fit, and two, he just looked good. That in fact, he was funny. Anytime he said something, he was funny. He would have these sayings that would just be hilarious. And any room he went into, he just oozed sex. He was just like this dude, like, you know what I'm saying? Like he was just that guy. Like if this was
Yeah.
high school, he would have been the popular person everybody wanted to be. He was that guy.
Yeah.
So I remember being around him. And at this time, like I wasn't the most confident fellow, but I knew I was attractive. I knew I was funny, but I wasn't funny like him. I wasn't attractive like him.
Hmm.
And I remember one day me and him had went to the gym, and I didn't really go to the gym. I ran around the track a little bit. I lifted a couple weights, but gym wasn't my thing. So he was working out, and I remember looking at him as he's sitting there pumping the weights, and I was having the thoughts like, man, if I could just have those muscles, if I just had his personality. And then almost like a lightning bolt, I was like, what's wrong with you?
Mm.
Look at you. You know how awesome of a person you are? Why are you talking to yourself like that? Would
Mm.
you say that to your best friend?
Mm.
And if you won't, why would you say that to yourself? Because aren't you your best friend? And in that moment, I was like, I gotta stop this. I gotta stop comparing myself to other people. Like, I gotta start valuing what's good with me. And I
Mm.
think that was my moment. I
I love
think.
that. Yeah. It's fascinating how that self judgment and judgment of others can also strip them of their superpower. Like, what a
Yeah.
great superpower he had, you know? And
Yeah.
if we continue to compare ourselves to one another, we don't allow someone else to shine in their own uniqueness,
Right.
and admire them for their uniqueness.
Hmm.
It's really fascinating. I also was wondering when you talk about talking to yourself with kinder language, how do
Hmm.
you handle when other people talk to you with negativity? Because I know, I'm sure in your lifetime, people
Hmm.
have thought that maybe positivity was naive or positivity was ignoring reality or the facts. So, when you
Right.
get those kinds of hits against you,
Hmm.
how do you stand back up and say, no, this is a valid and powerful, unique superpower?
Mm. I think that's the first time anyone's ever asked me that type of question. And it's interesting. I think you have to judge the room.
Mm.
So, again, I'm not perfect. So, a lot of times, my wife, she would come to me to talk about an issue or, excuse me, she would vent, for lack of better words, right? She didn't want me to fix the issue. She just wanted me to be there in support, which I get. Everybody has these moments, right? So, way back when, she would come to vent to me, and I would tell her something positive. Like, say if she was talking about a coworker that she just couldn't tolerate at that moment, right? That just annoyed her that day. I would say something like, well, did you try to talk to her? Did you express your feelings? I mean, she won't, like, maybe go to it when she comes in the room, go somewhere else. I would do that kind of thing. And she was like, I don't need you to fix my problem. I don't want to hear positivity all the time. I just came in here just to unburden something for a little bit. And I was like, oh, okay. All right, cool. So my pride got hurt just a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah.
But I had to realize, you know what? Maybe she's right. Not
Mm,
every moment needs to be a positive moment because it's perfectly okay to not be okay. You just can't stay there all the time. So I know for me, I'm a person, I'm really odd. So I'm a person that I really love sad love songs. That's like my thing. Those make me happy for some reason. I don't know why, but they do.
So
So
give us an example. What would be a sad love song that you love?
so I believe it's Carrie Underwood. She has a song called Drinking Alone,
Oh,
right?
that sounds
And to
very
me,
sad, Jay. Okay.
right? And like I love these songs, but these for me, hearing these songs make me happy. But
Oh,
a lot of times hearing these songs, or excuse me, a lot of times when I hear these songs are moments where either I want to be alone or I'm just reflecting on something, right? And
mm,
it's not because I'm necessarily sad. It's just I'm not in the mindset to be like happy go lucky,
yeah.
everything's shining rainbows. It's just I'm a mood I'm in. And I think everybody has those. It's just as long as you're not walking around like um grumpy or Eeyore or something like that, everybody has those moments. We're multifaceted people. And I think everyone needs to recognize that. So again, case in point, a lot of times on my social media handles, Mr. Positivity is in my tag. So there was one time where a lady had mentioned that her sister was sick with cancer and she didn't know what to do, and that the doctor said she only has a couple of days to live and she was terminally ill.
Mm.
And I just wrote on her thing, hey, I don't know what you're going through, but that is something very, very serious, and it's okay to not be okay. This is your sister. Give yourself time. It's completely understandable.
Mm.
And then some other person wrote underneath, I thought you were Mr. Positivity. Aren't you supposed to say something uplifting and make her feel better? And again, I had to check my ego because I was like, who is this person telling me how to be Mr. Positivity? But I stepped back and I was like, before I reply, let me woosah, let me calm down. And then I just simply replied, sir, I appreciate that. And you're right. I wish I had something positive to say in every single moment. But sometimes the best thing you can do is just let a person be that person.
Mm.
And he didn't reply back. And I don't know what he thought of that, but that's just how I replied to it. So I don't think there is a positive thing you can say in every moment because sometimes you just need to be there for people.
What I love about acknowledging that is that it's not
Mhm.
stripping you from being able to still be Mr. Positivity. So just
Mhm.
because one person has an opinion about it, or because there's a situation that maybe doesn't in the moment have a positive spin, doesn't mean
Mhm.
that your Mr. Positivity superpower is not still super important and valuable in this world, and that you can't still
Right.
own that superpower. I love that. I love that it
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily have to reflect negatively on who you really love to be, and that maybe there are moments when you just can't fully be that impassioned self, but really be able to
Mhm.
still honor that person and that part of yourself. I love that. That's really cool.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, no. I was wondering if you have noticed in your own children, or have they
Mhm.
voiced what their superpowers are? Do you think that there's an age when you start to really own that and recognize that it's a unique part of you that's something different from everybody else?
Hmm. I don't think they've noticed yet. I mean, my
Mm,
wife and I have discussed what we think our kids are good at, but only they in their minds can say, "Yeah, I'm good at this. This is what my superpower is." They haven't come to me personally to say, "Hey, Dad, this is what my superpower is." They both know that my alter ego is Mr. Positivity because, again, in my house, the running joke is, "Oh, Dad has something positive to say. Here we go.
yeah.
He's uplifting. Let's go." So because like I said, like I'm a very positive person, and I don't like to spend time in negativity too long. I mean, there's a time and a place, but again, there's like you have to keep going, regardless of what happens. But I think they're starting to grow in it. Right now, my daughter is 15. She's a quite challenging teenager, for lack of better words. But I think she's learning who she is and who she wants to be. I mean, she's very headstrong. She's very opinionated and independent, and I'm proud of that. Even though it is challenging, for lack of better words, but I think they subconsciously probably know what their powers is. It's just a matter of them owning it.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. And I think it's probably a journey as well. You know,
Absolutely.
it's funny, Jay, what I haven't told you is that my alter ego is also a positivity person. It's so
I love
funny.
it.
It's so funny. I recognize so much in you,
Mm-hmm.
in myself as well. And I reflect back on a time in my life where I just couldn't be positive. I was in a very deep, sad place, a grief
Yeah.
place. And it was so funny because it wasn't until I recognized that I wasn't stepping into who I love to be that I was able to see why I was so depressed. You know, I think that aligning with your superpower is such a critical thing. And then being able to stand in that superpower with courage despite what's happening around you. And although I totally
Absolutely.
agree with you, I think there are times where, you know, you can't be positive all the time, but if you constantly deny yourself that ability, if you say, well, you know, the world around me is telling me that this is naive or that I'm, you know, faking it or that there's nothing positive about every situation, you start second guessing yourself. That's when you start to lose who you are. And squelching that superpower really hurts more and more. And it's really interesting talking to you about children too and watching them on their journey as they start to align closer and closer to who they really are. I know you had mentioned to me before that you homeschool your children.
I do. I do.
So is any of this in your homeschooling curriculum in terms of aligning with who you are? I think that's the one thing that's missing from traditional schooling right now. Do you incorporate any of this understanding who you are in your curriculum with your children?
Oh, absolutely. It was a little easier before COVID because we were able to go out and do more things. But even now, my kids have an assignment where they have to tell me who they are
Wow.
in their own words. Um, they're different ages, so my daughter has it a little bit harder. She has to do, I feel like it's 5 pages front and back of who she is, what she wants to be 20 years from now, and how is she going to stay in line with her journey.
Wow.
So my son is 2 pages front and back, and essentially the same topic. But it's things like that, or even still, I might ask them. One of my favorite questions is to ask them, "What have you failed at this week?"
Mm.
And it causes them both anxiety because, first of all, it is a weird question to ask someone, "What have you failed at?" So, but the purpose of that is to let them know that, hey, you're gonna fail along the way, but what did you learn from that failure? Because you have to fail your way to success.
Mm.
And I think that helps them figure out who they are as a person and how they deal with things. So right now, my son, he struggles with usually writing and reading things because he feels he's not good at it. Now, over a course of a few months, his confidence has been able to build up,
Mm.
but he knows that's a place where he has to work harder at. And it's wonderful to see him be able to say, you know what, I got this project in ELA, which I used to call it English. But like,
New world, new titles for our
right.
classes. I know.
Uh, but it's wonderful to hear him say things like, you know what, I have this project in English or ELA. I don't like it. I feel like it's going to be a task, but I'm going to get it. I'm going to do my best to at least get an 80 or an 85.
Hmm.
And that I'm like, okay, cool. I can deal with that. You got goals, you got tasks that you feel like you can achieve and you reach. Go ahead and knock it out.
That's great. Just giving permission to fail as well. Giving
Exactly.
permission to try, even if you're scared and you think you might fail, but just to
Right.
put your best foot forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. You know, as a great mentor to your children, you've mentioned several times mentors in your own life. You
Right.
mentioned two gentlemen, Mr. Les
Mm-hmm.
Brown and
Mm-hmm.
Fred Doc
Yeah.
Williamson. how have you found mentors in your own life when you've looked for guidance? Where have you gone for resources, or have they found you?
I have been completely blessed that they found me,
Well,
to be honest. Well, well, the godfather of speaking, Mr. Les Brown, I think I followed him on social media for years, and his team put out a call because he was doing a mentorship program. And it's one of those things that, like, he put a post on Instagram and it was like, oh, would you love to work with Les Brown? Click here or something like that. So I clicked it just because I was curious. I'm like, yeah, I would like to work with Mr. Brown. And it seemed like almost like an automated system was replying back every time like I wrote.
mhm,
So I was
mhm.
very skeptical and I was like, okay, whatever. This isn't going to amount to nothing. You're going to, in a few moments, you're going to ask me for like some huge lump sum of
Yep.
money and this amount to nothing. But funny enough, I followed that thought process. And before I knew it, I was working with Mr. Les Brown. I spoke on stage with him, and he is just a awesome,
Wow.
great person to be around. And I love him to death. And he is just an awesome, good guy. And funny enough, Doc, Mr. Williams, I was like, I'm vegan. So I took a course through Main Street Vegan with another mentor of mine. I read her book, Victoria Monroe. I read her book, and in the back of her book, it said that she holds these vegan seminars or academy. And I was like, okay, I'm down. Let me go to this. So I went to her. I got to meet her. She became a mentor of mine, and she's so awesome. And I actually learned the phrase, "Do as much good as you possibly can with as little harm to others,"
Mhm.
from her. And that became, and during her workshop is where I met Mr. Williams or Mr.
Mm,
Williamson.
mm,
And it's just the way the universe works is like when you start moving towards your destiny, when you start moving towards your calling and your purpose,
mhm.
the universe gets out the way and helps you along. So a lot of these people that I've met and I've gotten contact through, it wasn't, well, it was me taking action, but
Yeah.
it was the universe pulling them all in my direction.
Love that. Oh, so true. So true. I think that's incredible, and I think the power of mentors is huge
Oh,
as well.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I'm a firm believer that there's nothing in this world we can do without help. I don't think there's any person who is self-made or can get to the top without help of some kind. And everybody needs a mentor in every aspect of your life. You need someone who has been down the road that can help you see the pitfalls that you might go through to make it
Mm.
as, you're still going to have bumps, but it'll make it as less bumpy, you know?
I love that. I love that. Absolutely. Now, where before I ask you our final 3 questions,
Okay.
I would love for you to let our audience know where we can find you online or social media. How can my audience learn more about you?
So anyone wanting to connect with me, please feel free to email me at jreace@gmail.com. And also on social media, you finding Jay Reace on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and I'm trying to get on Twitch. I'm not too active on there, but I'm on there, and I'm on because I like video games. And we said, like, I'm a huge geek, I'm a huge nerd. I love my stuff, and I make time for the things I love, and that's what I try to do.
That's awesome. Actually, before we get to our last 3 questions, I do have to ask you another
Yeah.
question. This relates back to what you were saying earlier about when you
Hmm.
were in your childhood, your
Yeah.
parents were guiding you more towards athleticism, and
Hmm.
you really knew that you had a different calling or something
Hmm.
else that was unique inside of you. And
Yeah.
going back to the idea of parenting, now in the era of computers,
Hmm.
online, gaming is so popular. And I'm
Right.
asking this question for a very personal reason. I have a phenomenal son I have 3 children, and one of
Okay.
my sons he's really talented with technology. He's
Mm.
brilliant in that regard. But
Yeah.
the fear steps in from
Right.
parenting
Hmm.
position. And man, I just want him to play a sport or write a a chapter or paint a picture or pick up
Hmm.
a camera. I just want him to do something else to express his creativity. And I
Ah.
think it's just that fear once again stepping in where
Hmm.
he really has such a calling to technology and
Hmm.
gaming. And all I see is the terror of online dangers and Twitch. When you said the word Twitch, I got a
Uh-huh.
twitch. I was like, oh my gosh, the Twitch keeps coming up in my 13-year-old's
Right.
vocabulary. So,
Hmm.
from that perspective, how can I see this differently? How can I see gaming as an opportunity for him to express his superpowers?
So as adults, we have to learn to put parameters up, okay? Because we know there are certain dangers out there that can either hinder, hurt, or God forbid, take our children. So we have to be very conscious of these dangers. At the same time, we have to be able to give our children freedom to express and explore themselves. So my wife and I had a conversation with both our kids. Hey, look, we're not trying to stifle you, but you have to understand not everybody in this world is here to help you. There are people in
Mm,
this world who intentionally want to harm you because of their issues. It's not your problem,
mm,
it's theirs.
mhm,
And because it's theirs, you have to be mindful of it,
mm.
right? So when it came time for my daughter to get a cell phone, she got a cell phone because she used to walk, I think, about 9 or 10 blocks to school. Like
Mm.
she would leave the home and she'd walk. And we felt that she needed a cell phone just in case, because you never know. We lived in a very big city. And we had that conversation with her. So we put almost every parental guideline you could think on that phone. She had like, it was limited to a certain time. She could only be on it at a certain time. School was like, it would cut off. She had to be at school by 7:50. So the phone would cut off at 8 a.m.
Wow.
and it would cut back on, I think, around lunchtime, and then it would cut off again, like right after lunch and stuff like that. Now, the way the phone worked, it had a feature where if she really wanted to be on it, all she had to do was put in a passcode. She could still use her phone,
Okay.
but I was able to see it if she did that. Like I
See,
would get
this is
another.
the benefit of having good technological skills as a parent, because I didn't even know a phone could do that.
Right,
But
I'm a little bit
anyway,
of a techie. I'm a little bit of a techie myself.
man, that's a
So
superpower for Jay right there.
exactly. So like, and luckily, like a lot of my friends hit me to this stuff, and then
Yeah.
Googling and YouTube, you
Yeah.
find a lot of this stuff
Yeah.
out too. But again, I had a conversation with my daughter. Like, look, this isn't about you not getting to have fun and do like your
Mhm.
friends. This is about protecting you.
Yeah.
And we had a long, honest conversation because again, there were times where she was like, well, my friends can do this. They don't have all this on there. I'm like, I get that. And that's how their parents want to raise them. That's perfectly fine. But for me and my comfort, if you want to have this phone, there's certain things that I have to do to make me feel comfortable and feel that you are safe. So
Mm,
that's the first thing.
mm,
So when it came to time for my son, because right now my son has a Twitch channel and he's streaming and talking to people. So again, I had to have a conversation with my son like, hey, there are some ground rules. The first
mm,
rule is do not give anybody any personal information.
mm,
Do not tell them where you live. Do not agree to meet up with anybody. Do not do anything that puts you out of this persona that you're setting up online. That's the
mm,
first thing.
mm,
The second thing is you are not putting your real name on anything that goes
mm,
out to the web
mm,
at all. So my son, like he loves things. So he came up with this crazy username that he loves and that he uses. And that's
mm,
what people know him by. And
mm,
he knows that if there's anyone on there that's having a conversation that asks him any personal information, he's supposed to come get me or his mother
mm,
to handle the conversation. And my daughter knows the same thing. So there's all these rules that made us feel comfortable that he knows that he implements. And we have to trust that he's going to follow these rules. Now, my daughter and my son, every so often, like, I don't know, once a year, maybe twice a year, we reevaluate rules because they're still growing. And as they grow, they're allowed to have certain rules let
yeah.
go or maybe tweaked a little bit. So my daughter used to have a bedtime of, I think, 9 o'clock. She had that bedtime all the way until she was, I don't know, maybe 12 or 13. She came to me and she was like, my friends don't. My friends this, my friends that. And I'm like, hey, if you want to reevaluate this rule, you need to come to talk to me, not because your friends can, but because you want to.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple weeks, I guess she retweaked how she was going to come and approach the idea. She came back. She was like, hey, daddy, I'm not tired at 9 o'clock. A lot of times when I go to bed, I'm laying there until I fall asleep. And that's not until 10:30, 11 o'clock.
Mm.
Can we increase my bedtime? So I was like, okay, that makes sense. I get that completely. So how about 10 o'clock? Is 10 o'clock fair? And of course, kids being kids. How about 11:30?
Yeah, right.
And I was like, well, no, we're not doing 11:30. And I stood firm and I was like, 10 o'clock. And she was like, 10:30? Okay, 10:30. 10:30. So now 10:30, I think we let that go maybe about a year and a half ago. And now she's at the point where she doesn't have a bedtime, but she's old enough and mature enough to know she doesn't necessarily need to stay up past 11 o'clock, 11:30. She gets tired. Normally on any normal night, she goes to bed around 11 o'clock. I mean, there's some nights where she stays up because of whatever reason, but on average, she tends to go to bed at 11 because she self-governs herself because she learned there's really no need and no point. Like other people might want to stay up because they feel like they can't. Now that she can, she don't really want to.
Yeah, and
So,
that's the whole point, is being able to self-evaluate. And when you're exhausted
right.
the next day, to make the decision to go to bed earlier, not because your dad told you to, but because you
Right.
can self-recognize your own needs. Yeah, that's great.
Exactly. But I
Great.
think with the whole video game thing, it's one, learning what my fears were
Yeah.
and how to manage that with a kid who essentially has no fears.
Yeah, and that's the truth. That's the truth. Well, thank you for that. I
Oh, you're welcome.
appreciate it.
I
That's
hope it
been,
helps.
it does. It helps enormously. Thank you. And I
Yeah.
was taking notes as you were speaking because I'll put
Yeah.
those guidelines in place.
Yeah.
So now our final three questions. And Jay, you're not going to believe this, but one of my
Okay.
final three questions that I
Uh-huh.
ask of all my guests
Okay.
is, what is your superpower? So we talked about that. I told you and I have more in common than you know.
I love it.
So
I love it.
we've talked about that ad nauseum, and I know what your
Mhm.
superpower is. So
Right.
instead, I'm going to use a question that you like to use.
Oh, okay.
It's a unique twist to this episode. And the
Okay.
question that I know you like to use is, who would you like to have dinner with and
Oh,
why? Now, you've asked that of many people, but
yes, I have.
we want to hear your response, Jay.
Oh, wow. If I could have dinner with any person. Mm. Now, see, if it was more than one person, I think it would be easier to answer this question. But if I had to have dinner with just one person, actually, you know what? So this is a side that I don't really get to show much on camera and in front of people. So um, my great uncle Hank, he passed away when my daughter was like 2 or 3 or something like that. But he was very sick before he passed away. And I was in the military and I was traveling a lot. And the real honest answer is I just didn't make time to come and see him in his last final days and moments and stuff. And again, I knew he was sick, but I always felt like there was more time. And if I could just have one more conversation with him, just to hear his laugh and just for him to call me boy, because like like I didn't have a name. He would, hey boy, come here, boy. If I could just hear him just call me that again, it just I love that. So that would be my one person.
Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right. Question number 2 is, what is your definition of happiness?
My definition of happiness would be not letting people control my emotions. That's happiness.
Wow. Wow. That's a deep one. And then the final question is, if all of this incredible work and support that Mr. Positivity puts out there online and the incredible book that you've written, Legacy, were all to be washed away and stripped off the online. Oh, I know it hurts.
I know, right? That pained me when you said that. Like, oh.
Oh, Jay, here we go. And you had one opportunity to leave your daughter and your son with a final message for them to take into their future, your legacy statement. What would that be?
Oh. You gave me some. I thought my questions were tough on Bite the Bullet. Wow. Oh. If I had one thing to say to my kids to leave them a lasting legacy, I think I'd tell them, you're enough.
Ooh.
Just
Ooh.
you're enough.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, Jay, it is an honor to meet you. I am so glad to have that the universe aligned to bring us to each other and for me to get to ask you these questions and get to know you better. I'm so excited to read your book. And you mentioned Bite the Bullet here at the end of the episode. So please, to my audience, check it out on podcast venues, wherever you listen to your podcast, Bite the Bullet. It's excellent. And thank you so much for spending this hour with me today. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. This has been a joy and a pleasure, and I loved it. So
wonderful. Wonderful. Thanks for sharing your stories. And thank you to all of our listeners who have listened to this episode. I'm sure you got as much out of this as I did. And I'm so glad that I was able to introduce this incredible man to you. Oh. So thank you. And remember, today is going to be a great day. Bye-bye.
Yes, it is.
Awesome. We did it.
Nice. I love it. Thank you. That was such a great episode.
Oh,
Thank you
that was so good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jay. It's so funny. As I'm sitting here, I didn't want to tell you before we got on here, but it's so funny. Many people call me Mrs. Positivity, and I didn't want to take away from your superhero. But as you were saying that, and then it was so funny because I literally finish every episode asking people what their superpower is. And it was so fun just to hear the value that you place in that and hearing your story. And it's just really cool to meet someone like you and recognize some beautiful things that I see inside of you that really helps me reflect on some things that I value inside myself. So thank you.
Oh, again, thank you for having me on the episode. And if you need anything, whether just support, advice, just be on the show again, just to promote and share your stuff, just let me know.
Well, if you ever need somebody to interview on your show, please hit me up. Let me know.
Oh, absolutely.
I would be honored.
I have your email. So yeah, I will be most definitely sending. Let me actually write a note for myself now.
That'd be great. And thanks for your tips on how to parent my son. It's so funny here in what I've turned into my podcast studio is also his gaming room. So I'm sitting here staring at his gaming chair. Oh my gosh. And when you said Twitch, I was like, oh dear Lord, that word, if this keeps coming up, all the things he's streaming on Twitch, it terrifies me. So that was great. Thank you.
Oh yeah. I mean, the fear is always going to be there, as a parent. Like right now, my daughter is in the process of learning how to drive and get her driver's license. And that fear is just like, oh my God, because they don't know. And I'm a firm believer of trying my best to not project my fears and all my issues onto them. Yeah. One of my favorite films is the Bruce Lee's The Last Dragon. And in that movie, he has a scene, like it starts with a scene of the Japanese culture of like a warrior fighting the father. And if the father loses, those sins and those things get passed on to the son, and they got passed to Bruce. And then there's a scene at the end of the movie where Bruce has to do the same thing to protect his son, and they kind of say that's the reason why he died in that film that he was making.
Yes,
I mean, it's their interpretation and stuff. But it ends with him protecting his son and not passing on his fears. And that image is always stuck in my head of me trying to do my best to not project those fears onto my kids. So as my daughter is in this process of learning, I'm doing my best to not project of the worst that could happen.
I know it.
So it's just one of those things. So Yeah.
That's another area of growth for all of us as parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I love it. Well,
Yeah.
thank you again. It's an honor to get to know you. And I'm so excited to stay in touch. And thank you for this hour. And stay safe out there in the weather.
Oh, I'm not going outside. I'm inside the whole time. I'm not a person of cold. I'm inside by my fireplace with a good book. I got my I'm actually reading now the 10X rule, and I'm loving it. And
Oh,
so
it's
I'll
such a good one.
yes.
Yeah, love that. Very good. So you mean I can't invite you up to Maine anytime soon, Jay?
Oh no, I love Maine. Funny enough, and see, like you said, we have so much in common. Like
Interesting.
our family does our best to take multiple family vacations throughout the year.
Yes, you mentioned that.
And to this date, or at least me and my wife's favorite vacation was to a little rustic campsite called um, the Outdoors, and it was in Maine. It was in I forget the name of the city, but it was like at the top of Maine. Luckily, we
Ooh.
went in the summertime, so it wasn't cold. It was warm. It was right by a lake. We could just literally run off the porch, run right into the lake. But Maine was so beautiful, and I'm so glad we went. It was such a good. Like we keep talking about, oh, we're gonna get back up there. We're gonna get back up there.
Well,
But,
please, once COVID dies down and we can travel wherever we want to, reach out to me if you guys ever are thinking of coming up to Maine. It sounds like our
oh,
kids are similar ages and it would be awesome.
absolutely,
We'd be honored
absolutely.
to host you.
Oh,
So
thank you.
great to meet you, Jay.
Likewise,
All
likewise.
right. Stay in touch.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
Bye, Jay.